So we're very focused on how do we do that for clients, that we know and understand what's really important to them, and we build into our system an expectation that our folks are going to go out and try and exceed those expectations and make clients feel important and create those wow, unreasonable hospitality type moments that I think regardless of the environment, we're going to have a lot of success.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Next Mile. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. And today I am joined by Phillip Hamman, the president and CEO of Linscomb Wealth. And also, I think this is really cool. Phillip is an aspiring, but also an accomplished wake surfer and rocking and rolling behind boats on the lake out there. So Phillip, thanks so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and maybe went a little far with accomplished, but thank you for saying that.
You're welcome, man. How'd you get into wake surfing? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, so always liked the lake, hadn't spent a lot of time out there, but went with my wife and her family on a family reunion in a lake in Arkansas. And all of a sudden, her family members came out with these really cool wake surfing boats. And so got into that, and it took me a few years, but yeah, so had to do that myself. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It feels like that's gotten very hot as opposed to like wakeboarding. I feel like more and more people are doing the wake surfing thing as opposed to getting on the line and going back out a little bit further. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my 16-year-old, my 13-year-old, they like to wakeboard. It moves a little faster. The wake surfing, you're going kind of 10, 12 miles an hour. That's more my speed.
I like it, man. All right. Well, wake surfing and everything aside, Phillip, I love to ask everybody who comes on this show the same first question. So you're not going to be exempt from that. Over the hundreds of conversations I've had on air and off air, I've found everybody has a unique path to this industry. And that path could be traditional. It could be you followed in family footsteps, or it could be untraditional, where we've had some people on the show who didn't even know this was an industry before they came into it. So I like to say they came in through the side door. But whether your path was traditional or untraditional, I've found everybody has what we call a money moment. That was this moment in your life where the light bulb clicked on and you said, yes, this is it. This is what I want to do for my career. This is how I want to serve people. This is how I want to spend my time. So for you, what was that money moment that led you to having this conversation with me today?
Yeah, I would maybe say, I don't know if I had a money moment. Maybe it's been a money process. You know, growing up, always liked money, always liked things of value. You know, was real big into sports growing up, played baseball in high school, thought I was going to go the baseball route, but really not that great. About as good at baseball as I am wake surfing. So maybe, had a few little opportunities, but decided, you know what, I'm going to go to college and went to Texas Tech out in Lubbock where I grew up and tried a few times. So I went to school and then decided, hey, maybe I do want to go back and play baseball, but that only lasted about a week and said, nope, I want to go back to school and pursue a career. There's no big league future in that for me. So I started out at tech in architecture and civil engineering, but when I came back after the baseball thing, I said, I want to try something new. And there was this cool little program that had a lot of buzz about it. And that was the Family Financial Planning Program at Texas Tech, which has become fairly well known in the industry. And so I said, I'll give that a shot. And even through the coursework, I wasn't 100% sure that's the route I wanted to go. I wasn't sure I wanted that desk job. But out of that, what I did find is I really loved the program and the people and just how close it is. It feels a lot like the RIA industry still today. And so I stuck with it, and that led me down the path that I've been on ever since. And I feel so fortunate to be here at Linscomb Wealth today and to continue to work in kind of this boutique setting with really great people and a collegial culture and in a business where you get to help people and work on complex things. And so again, more of a process than just one point in time that said to me, hey, this is what you should go do, but really glad to be here and thankful for that path.
Yeah, that's amazing. The Texas Tech Financial Planning Program is legendary. So it's kind of cool that you were early into that. Because I remember when I got into this industry and somebody was talking about, oh, Texas Tech has this great financial planning program. And I was like, wow, I didn't even know colleges were doing that, right? And they were one of the pioneers of it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's grown a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your journey after that. So you had this kind of money process rather than money moments. I love that frame of this. But speaking of processes, so back in 2019, you put together your first 5-year plan for the firm. I can't imagine you foresaw all the bumps in the road that were coming over that period, even just a year later with the entire world changing. Looking back on that, how would you guide your firm or any firm that has these ambitious goals and plans when the winds are not always at your back?
one, I have the benefit of being part of a firm that just has a really long legacy. I mean, this next year will be the firm's 55th year in business. So fortunately, I'm inside of an organization that has a lot of generational experience to rely on. And so you've got a lot of folks you can call on for mentorship in terms of been there, done that, seen a lot of different market environments. And so just really beneficial to be in that type of environment. I think the big things for us is we started looking at the future more strategically. What did we want to achieve? How did we want to achieve that? What type of client did we want to work with and serve? And starting from that viewpoint was really helpful in guiding the decisions. And as you went along and you set off, and we got on a pretty good track, we made one acquisition in Atlanta. That's the first time we've done that. So you get in there and it's like, okay, we found somebody, they're a great cultural match. And then you learn maybe we don't know so much about acquiring and onboarding and bringing in. And so you've got a little bit of a learning curve that you go through and definitely learn some things out of that. And so as we've gone along, I think the big thing is be strategic minded, but definitely be adaptable because there's so much out there you really can't control. It's a lot like the financial planning process and our philosophy there of what are the decisions I can really focus on, and the rest of it is just going to happen and we have to adapt and, make sure our plan, we stay focused on our plan, but we evolve as we need to. And you look at the last 5 years, a lot's happened. You've had a pandemic and, a tough market for 60-40 type investors. So there's been a lot of different things out there.
Yeah, well stated. I want to come back to that, but I do know, and you mentioned it there, part of your plan has been growing it organically. And I think from the research and some of the stuff we chatted with you about, LW's chairman, Walter Christofferson, had some real encouragement for you when you started looking at all this inorganic growth stuff. And he said something along the lines of, you guys are going to kiss a bunch of frogs as you go through this process as a part of your 5-year plan and all of that type of stuff. As you've learned through this process, as you've gone, you continue to grow inorganically. Any insights on how to kiss fewer frogs or how to make sure that you're not spending a bunch of time with frogs in the process?
Yeah, first, I definitely want to give a nod to Walter. Just has a lot of wisdom. He's been here at the firm a really long time, and he has a great way about taking complex things and getting them down to little quips like kiss a lot of frogs. And at the end of the day, I think we're pretty comfortable as a firm to go out and to kiss a lot of frogs and to have a lot of conversations. And I think you're right that you want to filter that down and try and focus on those that are going to be most productive for you because you want to be efficient with your time. But rarely have I found it that we've been disappointed to have a conversation because you always learn, you meet somebody new, you learn something a little bit different and you gain some perspective out of that. Myself and our chief investment officer, Ryan Patterson, were recently on a call with a couple of investment bankers talking about what they had to offer and how they see the world. And they actually really pushed us on the idea of, well, what's your thesis? And it's like, well, we just went through who we are as a firm and how we want to approach things. And they came back and said, well, yeah, I get that, but what's really your thesis? How are you going to stand out? And so I think for us, that was a great nudge. It was a great question. And Ryan and I hung up the phone and sat here for a good while talking about, what is our thesis and value add as we go out and talk to folks as to why would you want to join an LW? And for us, that work's been very valuable. And so I guess maybe that would be the suggestion I would have for, if you're going to go out there, go through that process of very specifically defining what value do we bring to somebody that might want to join our firm, and to be as specific about that as you can. What's that value proposition? And I think as you go out and have conversations, it'll help guide you in those discussions or what discussions to have or not to have.
Yeah, well stated. So how did you develop that thesis? Because that's something I wanted to ask you a little bit about too. I mean, I think there's a question of what differentiates you. I think there's a question of what makes you great, or what are the things that you've really focused on. But you get asked that question, you have to figure it out. But what helped you develop that thesis?
Really a lot of conversation. And as you go out in the marketplace and you hear what others are saying, and you look at their website or you go to a conference and you hear the presentations, and I think everybody obviously is going to say it's harder than ever to get out there and differentiate yourself, harder than ever before. And, even just in the last few years. And so we really we spent a lot of time on where are we differentiated? What is that client we serve? How do we serve them well? How do we create value? And just kept trying to break that down and get that to the lowest level that we could. And you get down to a handful of things and you look at it and say, I think that's a pretty strong thesis.
I love it. That's great. So maybe it was on purpose, maybe it was on accident, but you all have acquired, or you have about my research, 6 firms in the Southeastern United States. Was that purposeful? Like, hey, we want to target the Southeast as a geographic region with some of the growth that we're doing, or did that all just kind of happen by coincidence?
Our various office locations, the one in Atlanta came about from acquisition. Some of the others came about from recruiting. And then some are just expanding out of Houston. So a few different ways that exposure's come about. And for us, we look at it in terms of where do we want to be at this phase as a company? And obviously Houston's home here in Texas. So Texas, the Southeastern United States. So if you kind of think these days SEC football, which incorporates a few Texas schools, that's a pretty good way to think about the footprint we'd like to have. So what are the markets we can go into and feel like we can add value for clients?
Yeah.
Find great folks and be a good match for the firm.
I like that. I'm going to take a hard left turn here just because you mentioned it. So you went to Texas Tech. Football is like transforming with all this NIL stuff and everything. And it really seems like Texas Tech is on the rise, right? They're kind of maybe moving from a little bit more of a mid-market school to it seems like they're trying to play in bigger waters with this new environment and everything. Are you bullish on Texas Tech's football program, or how are you thinking about that?
Well, I grew up in Lubbock, went to Texas Tech. So of course I'm going to be bullish on Texas Tech football. But as a longtime Tech fan, you've got to be careful about how bullish you want to be on the future. But I think the university is doing the right things. The football stadium is beautiful. They've done a lot of work. There's a lot of great reasons to be in Lubbock, a lot of good people there. So I think they're doing the right things, and it's fun to see us competitive. I think we'll continue to go out there and do really well. So yeah, I'm bullish on Texas Tech football.
I love it.
Hope for a great season this fall.
You've also got this gunslinger, Patrick Mahomes, constantly marketing for you guys. You know, who doesn't want to go be the next Pat Mahomes? You got to go be a Red Raider, right?
That's right. Yeah, he's been a big supporter for the school.
That's amazing. All right. So we've talked a lot about your inorganic growth, acquiring firms, kissing frogs, things like that. But you all have put a good emphasis on organic growth. And I think the whole industry is. But organic growth is more than just what the market's doing for you. It's, a couple of different things there. So tell us a little bit about how the organic growth strategy fit into that 5-year plan that you put together.
Yeah, so I think to be successful at the M&A side for a firm like ours, we've got to have the organic growth piece as well. So if you're going to go out and make that thesis that you can help someone grow, you've got to be able to make good on that. And so as we think about organic growth, we think about it from a few different standpoints. We think about it as part of our training and development program. So are we giving our new advisors or our future advisors the skill set they need, the training that they need to go out and be successful in networking and business development? We're doing that in a few different ways today. We've got a wealth advisor residency program that we've created. And as part of that, we've had all of our folks go through a business development plan creation process. They presented those a couple of weeks ago to our executive committee and a few others. And that was one of the best days I've had here at the firm in quite some time. It's just so enjoyable to see them come in and talk about kind of near-term, midterm, and long-term goals. And they put so much thought and care into that. That was a fun day to hear everyone talk about how am I going to build my career and how I'm going to go out and network and make connections and be successful as an advisor. And that's one aspect of it. The other or another aspect is just continuing to focus on making sure we're taking really great care of clients, that we're providing that exceptional service that, we aspire to, that we're meeting their needs before we're trying to go out there and focus on growth. You've got to make sure you're taking care of the clients you have and making sure they know how important they are to us and how valued they are. Client retention, training, development. We're spending a lot of time, effort, and resources on our marketing program. We've gone through our rebranding. We've got a process in place where we've worked with a marketing agency to help us go out and do more digitally. So that's been an aspect as well as of the organic growth piece.
That's great. All right, I want to double click on something. So, I hear a lot of people when I have conversations, again, on air and off air, and I can understand that providing great service and doing great work for clients is the backbone of an RIA and what you do. I mean, it's really the thesis of the whole business. But yet so many firms do things differently and operate differently. So for you, how do you think about the standards of service at your firm? Or when you're looking at, hey, this is the backbone of what we have to do. Obviously, we have to do the blocking and tackling. But what does serving clients well or doing great work for clients actually mean in practice?
Yeah, so it can really mean a lot of things. And I believe one of the specific things that we do in our client onboarding process that we do really well is we do a good job. Our advisors do a great job of listening to clients and listening and understanding what's important to them. And then repeating back to them, did we get that right? And if you start there, the rest of it, is just, becomes part of your system or your process, which we're also big believers in having that system and process. So if I understand what's important to a client and I have a system and process in place that I'm always working on improving, and you build into that system and process the idea of exceeding expectation, taking care of what they said is important, exceeding their expectations and doing it consistently. I think that's so important as part of the process. The example I might have, which I loved, I've got a couple of Nicks here in the office, but one of the Nicks reached out to me and he likes to read all the stuff that I like to read. And he sent me this video on hot dogs. And I was like, Nick, what in the world are you sending me, Nick? And, it's this whole thing on unreasonable hospitality. And I don't know if you've seen some of that work. And I'm going to forget his name.
Yeah, Will Guidara.
Yes, that's exactly it. So I watched this YouTube video on hot dogs, and he tells his story about how he just wowed this patron at his restaurant and went above and beyond and created that moment. And so we're very focused on how do we do that for clients, that we know and understand what's really important to them, and we build into our system an expectation that our folks are going to go out and try and exceed those expectations and make clients feel important and create those wow, unreasonable hospitality type moments that I think regardless of the environment, we're going to have a lot of success. So you've got to have the planning, you have to have the investments, but really I think you have to have that mindset and commitment and system to going above and beyond and doing that consistently. And that's why I loved the hot dog story.
I love it. For those who probably haven't heard it, can you give us like the gist of it? Because I think I know what story you're talking about, but if you could give us like the high level, I'm not asking you to retell it perfectly, but for those who don't know, Will Guidara, Michelin star style chef and everything like that. Most of the time, if you're going to get a meal in one of his restaurants, it's going to be the white tablecloth, very elegant. So you wouldn't expect someone from that level of the culinary world to be talking about hot dogs. So with that tee up, Phillip, I'll let you kind of go from there.
Yeah, you set the stage well. So and my understanding is that Will overheard someone talking about their experience in New York, and the only thing they hadn't had was a hot dog off one of the street vendors, a water dog, maybe I think is what they called it. And so he tells the story. We go sprinting out the back door, and he goes and gets the hot dog, and then he brings it back inside to the chef, and then apparently had to sort of argue with the chef to convince him to turn the hot dog into more of a gourmet hot dog. And then they deliver this to the person sitting there that had talked about the only thing I didn't get was this, and then puts it in front of them. And you can imagine that experience created. I mean, if they didn't like the hot dog, the fact that somebody went to that much trouble to make sure they got the experience they were looking for their trip to New York. So it just 100% embodies what we would like to achieve. We did an offsite with our leadership group a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this book and this story. And I actually have his book sitting on my desk, as do a number of our other senior managers, and said, let's make sure folks every day when they walk by your desk are reminded of the idea of unreasonable hospitality. So we try to put things like that in motion.
I love that. I think that's cool to have the visual reminder and everything there. And I think the thing that strikes me about that story is the humility required to provide that service to the customer, right? And I think that's something that's a good reminder for all of us, is we might have our idea of what service or experience or anything looks like, but your clients and the people that are interacting with your firm have a different idea of what that is. And we all have to have the humility to recognize that if our goal is to serve people well, it might be going and getting a hot dog off the street instead of making them some sort of incredibly fancy plated meal or something like that. And actually, in this case, it was both, right? It's not that the only thing they ate in that meal was a hot dog. He gave them an incredible meal, but they were listening, they were attentive, and they were humble. And I think that's a cool framework for service. Speaking of frameworks, you talked about how you are a big fan of processes. You're a big fan of how to do things like that. There are all of these like kind of operating systems. You've got EOS out there. You've got the Get Things Done model. You got all of these. Now, for the processes and the ways that you run things at LW, are those based off of a templated thing like an EOS or those, or did you kind of build these from scratch and make them homegrown?
I would say there's some of both. Obviously, as a firm, you have near 55 years of operating history. And so you've got a lot of institutional knowledge, and we really try and do things as one team. So you've got the benefit of all that history, and then you've got the challenge of when you want to make a change. And again, as you described, we have a little bit of both styles of using an existing system versus what we might create from scratch. But two things come to mind for me when I think about the system. One, I was picking up my now 16-year-old from basketball camp at Texas A&M, and the coach was down there, and he was talking to these young men, and he was talking about his process of CPR. And CPR was character plus process equals results. And as I was sitting up the stands waiting for my son, to me, that really stood out, right? You look at the culture and character of a firm like LW, and if we can add to that and maintain to that the process, then the results will take care of themselves. So We try and embody that of, bringing the values of the firm together every day with this really great system, this one team approach that we have for going out and achieving results for clients. And the other one that stuck out recently, a few of us were at an RIA Edge conference in Nashville. And forgive me, I'm not going to remember the individual that made the statement, so I can't give proper credit. But they stood up there and they talked about something along the lines of 19 out of 20 franchises succeed, 19 out of 20 new small businesses fail. And the difference comes down to whether or not you have a system. And that really resonated as well. Those two kind of stories or events really stood out to me. And so obviously, as a firm that's been around a really long time and works as a one team and this team and committee approach, we have a lot of that. But we have to keep working on that system. We have to maintain our culture, and we have to keep working on that system to fit to make sure we can deliver that unreasonable hospitality that we strive to deliver for clients.
Oh, it's so good. I love that. I think even if they're not complex, I think there's more complexity in this business than people appreciate or realize, but taking a vast, solution like serving clients and everything and being able to bring it down into really digestible, memorable things like the CPR, the one team approach, like those types of things are really powerful and important. So it's cool to hear you say that.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is judd@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
When I think about systems, I can't help but also think about great systems, think about succession planning and what happens next. At LW, you have taken a pretty intentional approach to succession planning. You're trying to do a good job of attracting next-gen advisors. So you kind of have this almost whole approach to that as well, and a system thinking process for that. Tell us a little bit about your approach to succession planning.
It's a really important question, and there's a lot of parts to succession planning. There's succession planning for clients. There's leadership succession planning. There's a lot of different parts. And one interesting one for us right now, I think I mentioned it earlier, our Wealth Advisor Residency Program. So that's very much designed for the idea of we can bring folks in, we can take this institutional knowledge, this collective wisdom over 55 years that we've accumulated, and we can help train them and move them along in their career faster to help them to success, to help the other advisors they work with, to help clients faster. So a lot of it comes down to training and development and having recruiting programs and internship programs that we have so we can go out and find great talent, bring them in, train them in the LW way and the system that we have to go out and exceed expectations. So the training and development aspect is an important part. There was also this really great article I read not long ago in the Harvard Business Review, and I think it was referred to something like G6, and it was talking, not the Jets, it was talking about 6 generations in the workplace. And we've really taken that to heart. And so, for example, we start off in our quarterly staff meetings with some of the younger group getting up in front of the room and doing some things, talking about what's going on in their generation. And then we try to blend that from the other generations that are going on in the firm. So some of it's just that succession planning is making sure culturally that you're talking and listening to all the different individuals in the firm, because we span a pretty wide range of folks that have been in the industry 40, 50 years to folks that are really pretty brand new to the industry and a bunch in between. So making sure the generations understand each other and can get along, that's an important part of the succession planning as well. From a leadership perspective, we're trying to be very thoughtful about that. There's some great programs out there that the custodians offer that you can have your folks participate in. to build some management leadership skills. We're trying to make sure that our folks are getting leadership opportunities, leadership to lead a project or an opportunity to lead a project. Some examples, we have a philanthropy area that we're working on. We've got some of our group working on that. We've got some business development, marketing areas, other individuals are involved. So from a leadership and development standpoint, making sure your younger generation is getting an opportunity to lead projects, to get that experience, letting them go through the success and failures of all that as well. And then, of course, at some point in time, you've got advisors who are going to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm ready to retire and make a transition. And we've had a few different models of that over time. And today we've been working over the last year to create something more formal so that an advisor deciding that they want to retire and move to the next phase, that they have a lot of clarity of what that looks like and means for them, as well as the individuals coming along as new advisors for those relationships, what it means to them as well, so that the end goal is to make sure the client wins and has a very consistent experience, and then just making sure everybody's got as much clarity as possible. So some of it's formal in terms of having programs for how specifically it works, some of it's cultural, some of it's training and development, but really important to have all those aspects to make sure it goes as smooth as possible, because it's challenging.
Yeah. It is challenging. I love the way you just laid that out, because I think that what you're trying to do there, if I could be so bold, is reduce the emotions as much as possible in the process, because it can be such an emotional process. And so if you make it a system rather than a point in time decision, it's just like, this is what the system says, this is what the process says, this is what we do. You can remove a lot of the challenges that come in with just the human elements of all of that.
Exactly. If you're talking about an advisor that's ready to retire and move to the next phase, you can understand what they might be going through, but emotionally you're not there and haven't been there yourself, so you can't really fully empathize with the process. So just trying to be as sensitive to that as you can be. And same thing, I've forgotten what it's like to be a 22-year-old. My kids laugh at me when I try to understand, but yeah, you're 100% right on the emotional side of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so Milemarker, we're a technology company. I think you can't be a firm like LW and grow the way that you have without strategically using technology. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how tech fits into your next 5-year plan, how you're trying to leverage it the best way that you can, and the role that it plays in your growth.
Yeah, well, I think for any firm like ours, technology is really important. Just finished a conversation earlier this morning with our senior management group about talking about a 5-year technology roadmap. So we have a very good tech stack today that if you're in the industry, you'd probably look at and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense for the size and type of firm you are. But we're really trying to think strategically about where we want to go from a technology standpoint. But more importantly, I really want to bring that back to, the idea of how the impact we want to have from technology. And of course, we're always going to bring that back to the idea of, can we deliver that unreasonable hospitality? How do we use technology to free up time for our advisors and others to make sure that they've got a lot of time to deliver that highly personalized experience to clients? So important that we have it, important that we keep up with the changes and continue to develop those tools. But we're really looking at technology to make sure we have more time to focus more on the human element of the business, not so much, or maybe I'd say it a little bit differently, being careful that you don't end up with, wow, client, we've got this self-service technology-driven business model, and that you remove what's made that human element, which is what's made the business so successful, going all the way back to Dan Linscomb when he started the firm in 1971.
Yeah, well stated. Are there any pieces of technology in the tech stack that you think are providing outsized returns for your firm at the moment? I
would say we're getting what we would expect out of technology today. I think it's some of what we're looking at on the roadmap that would deliver the outsized, the tools and technology that we're evaluating that removes that administrative burden for our advisors in particular. If you go have a good meeting with a client, you've got a whole bunch of notes, and how do you make sure you get that in the system and track it and summarized and better prepare you for next time? I mean, those are great examples. If you can figure out how to implement those in a way that check all the boxes, including the regulatory boxes, those are fantastic tools to have, because it comes back to, now my advisor has more time to be looking at their list of clients and figuring out what they can do to better serve those clients. Well stated, man. Well stated. Okay. The topic of 5-year plans has come up a couple of times on this call. And one of the questions I love to ask people is, in your seat, is to get out their crystal ball, look a little bit into the future, and talk about some of the trends or the projections that they see coming down. So if you're building a 5-year plan right now, Phillip,
what are some of the things that you are trying to position your firm for? And what are you trying to consider when looking down the road of what's going to happen 5 years from now that you want to be ready for?
Yeah, so this gets back to that thesis we talked about earlier. Obviously, and you probably had a lot of your guests talk about the technology side and AI and how that might evolve the business. And I do think that's important, but I'm going to be a little bit repetitive and come back to we're going to lean into the human side. I think the firms, if you're going to be a holistic, fee-only fiduciary wealth advisor, the human element, it continues to remain just so important. And so we're going to focus on who can we serve, how can we serve them better, and then when it comes to, how are we going to go out to the marketplace and tell our story, making sure that we spend a lot of time on really drilling down to what do we do really well, who do we serve really well, and how do we add value for them. And that would be my recommendation to anyone is, really spend that time to figure out who you are and where you really add value for clients and to focus on that. Because I think at firms, we experience this as well. The talking points of the past aren't going to work so well in the future. It's just going to get lost in the noise of everybody else. And so if you can find a way to differentiate that message by becoming very specific on the value that you add and that your clients tell you add, then I feel like you can be very successful regardless of how the trends change. I know who I am, I know who I serve well, and I know how I do it. I'm going to focus all that I do on that aspect of things.
When you're saying that, I'm reminded of Jeff Bezos' whole thing in the technology world and all of that. Everybody's so focused on what's going to change, trying to catch the next wave. And he was always pretty notorious for the whole, what's not going to change 10 years from now? What's not going to change 20 years from now? And why don't we strategically build around the things that we think are not going to change, right? And, in his world, it's like people are always going to want low prices. They're always going to want their stuff to get to them as fast as possible. And they're always going to want choice and service. And I think when I just heard you answering that question, it was very remnant of that, of you kind of saying, hey, there's going to be a bunch of things that change. I'm sure that they are. I can't predict all of them, but I'll tell you what's not going to change is these things. And then that leads, what I also heard in what you said, it leads to great focus, which is how you build great businesses, is you are focused on the things that you're good at because you can't be all things to everybody. I love that answer, actually, for how you guys are approaching this over the next little bit.
I'm going to take your example and use it in a staff meeting if you don't mind.
No problem. Do it, man. Do it. Okay, we're going to move into the final segment of the show, Phillip. So this is what we call the Milemarker Minute. It's a series of lightning round questions. It's supposed to be a little bit more lighthearted, getting to know you a little bit better outside of the industry. So are you ready for the Milemarker Minute?
Yeah, I guess so. Ready or not, right?
Yes, sir. Ready or not, here we go. If you could travel anywhere in the world you've never been to before, where would you go?
I've actually not done a lot of traveling outside the U.S., so somewhere like Italy would be a lot of fun for me.
Would you want to go more like the cities of Italy, like a Rome or something like that? Or would you want to go more like country water stuff, like a Lake Como type of thing? What sounds better to you?
I'd say 50-50, back to those early college days in architecture. I've seen a lot of it in books. I'd love to see it in person, but I love to get out to something like the countryside or the water as well. So maybe that's a 50-50.
All right. I like that answer. Going along those lines, one of the questions I always love to ask, are you a mountains person or a beach person?
Of those two, I'm a mountains person, but if you give me a third choice, I'm a lake person.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Going back to the wake surfing thing, I should have known. What is the best book you've read or listened to in the past year?
I'm going to go a little further back if that's okay.
Fine.
And,
I'll allow it.
There's a book that I love called Imagined, and it's this book that talks about how you cross different things, and out of that you get innovation. It's one of those things that really makes you work. It's part of the creative side of the business of, maybe we should put some things together in a different way. And maybe it's kind of along the lines of a hot dog in our earlier conversation of trying to see things from a different perspective, and you might get a new solution to a challenging problem.
I like it. What's the best part about Houston, Texas, for those who don't go there very often?
Houston, Texas actually has a really great restaurant scene. There's a lot of good food in Houston, Texas. And if you take away the summer months and the summer humidity, the weather's actually really pretty good here about 9 months out of the year.
I like it. This is a good segue because my last two questions are about food. So what is the best flavor of ice cream?
Best flavor of ice cream, I'm probably going to be pretty boring. I just like plain chocolate ice cream.
Nothing boring about that. It's classic. Okay. And then, Phillip, 1 year from now, you are having a huge milestone moment, something that you are celebrating in a big way with all of the people that you love. what is the meal that you were selecting to celebrate that huge achievement?
Well, my mind immediately went to lunch and maybe a steak dinner.
Okay. I love it. I love it. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more question I love to ask people. This is for my own. So there is an alternate universe. Okay. So in this current one, you are the CEO and president of LW, but in this alternate universe, Phillip has a completely different career. In that alternate universe, what is your career?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning of the conversation. Maybe my baseball skills in that alternate universe would have been a little bit better.
I like it. I can relate to that very deeply. So you did it, man. You made it through the Milemarker Minute. Congratulations. I love the conversation. I love the way you're running the firm. I love the way you're building it. And I love the way that you are thinking in systems and processes for how to do a great job for your clients and then your team as well. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing all the insights.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, everybody, that's been another episode of Next Mile. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're consuming this. And if you'd be kind enough to leave us a review so that people who've never heard of the show or never seen it can find a great conversation like the one I just had with Phillip. But until next time, enjoy every mile.